Well, thanks for dropping by on a Friday afternoon. So if you're good to go, I'll start when you're ready. Everybody's good? It's been a challenging social, political, and financial environment with tons of turbulence, really since the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. Supply chain interruption, inflationary pressures, and increased challenges in our community, which includes things like downtown safety, safety on transit, and an increased number of protests and demonstrations, has placed considerable pressure on the budgets of public safety organizations, as well as partners in health, education, and municipal governments. Nobody has been immune, public and private sector alike, and I think we've all felt it as well in our personal lives. Practically speaking, we've seen increased costs for things like fuel, utilities, vehicles, parts, labor, insurance, plus a weakened Canadian dollar. All of these were issues that we were experiencing and that we were monitoring throughout 2024 and things that impacted our budget. Simultaneously, the photo radar program has been under review at the provincial level. This culminated in a significant policy decision in December regarding the direction of that program going forward. In mid-January, we received a report that identified the anticipated financial impact of approximately $28 million to our operating budget in 2025 and each year thereafter. After receiving the report, we immediately began examining strategies to reduce operating expenses as we work to absorb this impact so that we're not over budget by the time we get to the end of the year. $28 million is not insignificant. The CPS budget is constructed in a way that 85% of it is personnel costs, so salaries and benefits. Really what I'm talking about is people. And the other 15% is things like vehicles and maintenance and equipment, utilities, that sort of thing. So it's really difficult to find a sum of that amount in the budget without going into the people side of it. It's also the people side of the equation through which we get the bulk of our work done. As we were evaluating a variety of scenarios that we could use to address this shortfall, we needed obviously to have internal discussions with our employees. We know there will be impacts, and so as you can understand, the task before us is one that creates considerable angst inside of an organization. We wanted to have an opportunity to talk about the situation with our members first. There are, of course, the people that are out doing the heavy lifting and interacting with the community from day to day. And so we wanted to make sure that they were informed and supported about what was going on before we talked about this more publicly. An internal video inviting them to a town hall event was shared with the media, and that followed up by a number of requests for us to provide the video to other outlets. So while we didn't think that that was the appropriate way to go, I put aside a bit of time today to be able to personally answer any questions you might have in the alternative. I'll just finish my remarks by saying that operational policing responsibilities and responding to calls from Calgarians are our number one priority, and it will remain that way regardless. We only do get the work done one way, and that's we get that done through people. So supporting the people that are doing the work and making sure that they're safe, healthy, and supported is also a very, very critical piece of this for me as well. So I'll stop there, and I'll just answer any questions you might have in relation to this.
Are there any efforts underway right now to try to convince the province to rescind their stance on photo radar?
We haven't. We certainly, once we knew the impact of this to the CPS budget, we certainly let the Commission know right away. The Commission has let City Council know, as you can imagine, and certainly we've advised the province as a courtesy. So that's what we've done to date.
Of the $28 million, do we know just how much is from the photo radar and how much is from those other challenges, like you mentioned there with costs?
That $28 million is photo radar alone. So when we think about the turbulence in the environment and the talk of things like tariffs, that's a completely different conversation. So that's what I mean about all the turbulence in the environment. We buy a lot of things from the U.S. So like a 25% tariff on items would be a whole nother order of magnitude of an impact on the budget.
I guess, as you mentioned, you guys were discussing strategies. Policing is getting very complex. So how important is ensuring that those services remain, like service delivery is not impacted by whatever strategies you guys end up taking to reduce this shortfall?
Well, I would say this, Adam, I don't know if there's been a point at which it's been more important. So if you think right now, there's a lot of surveying done in Calgary. Internally, 85% of our employees think that's the biggest stressor, is the issues around workload and insufficient staffing. So that's a big deal, and that's at a time when there's a lot of demands on the organization. And that's also at a time when the city's growing like no other in the country. So you can imagine that's a very significant issue. When we survey the public also feels that public safety is a very big issue. When they talk about the police service, the majority feel like we're not appropriately staffed. And also in the communities, what they're hearing, they want to have more engagement with us and not less. So to the point right now when, even though by the numbers, the members are doing excellent work, and by the numbers, Calgary is actually doing very, very well in terms of crime statistics and that type of thing. But people don't feel that way. And so I think that's a big part of why they want to engage with members. And anytime we talk about what's happening here now, we're talking about a reduction in capacity, and that just means that we will not be able to do as much of what we are here to do and what people would like us to do. So therein lies the challenge.
What are some of the measures you're thinking of taking to bridge that fiscal gap?
Well, the big thing, and again, to try to avoid impacts to personnel, we're looking internally first, and we're a lean organization. I can tell you we've been through this before, so it's not as though there's a bunch of fat to cut. We're cutting muscle, anything that we do. The one thing that we do know is I would say that an area of focus right off the bat for us is around overtime and call-out. So over the last number of years, with all of the protests and demonstrations and additional requests for police, and given the fact that we've had staffing issues, we've in effect lived on a credit card. So we have called members in on overtime to cover some of the challenges, and we've balanced that off against vacancy dollars. So now clearly we're not going to be able to do that going forward. So last year, I think we had a negative variance in overtime and call-out to the extent of about $13 million. So if we're talking about trying to find $28 million within the budget before we go cutting staffing anywhere, that's somewhere where we really need to look. But that means some fundamental changes in the way that we're operating. And so that's some of the work that we're doing now. But to me, that seems to be the biggest opportunity without getting into call-out and staffing, or without getting into staffing. But again, that is something that will very much change the way that we've operated thus far over the last number of years.
To affect the community safety initiative at all?
I don't know. I think not. We just came through a very lengthy discussion there in November at budget adjustment time in relation to the Community Safety Investment Framework. We're very supportive of the program. We were the ones that initiated the program, as you know. So we're very supportive. We think it has been a very good program. One of the things that I can say that is going in our favor is the fact that through that program and some of the investments that have been made there, we have managed to actually reduce calls for service to the police service at a time when many other police services are saying they're seeing increases, and we know that we're seeing increases with respect to EMS and Calgary Fire and others. So that program has contributed directly to that. So we know it's an important program. We know that the Police Commission and City Council reiterated that as well. So I would say right now, is anything being looked at in relation to that? I would say no.
On the morale side, Chief, the last few years to improve morale on the service side here. I mean, is this likely to maybe undo some of that work?
Yeah, people are dancing in the hallways. That's how it's going. The things that people have said, when we talk to the members, the things that they've said is that the things that are important to them are workload and staffing, and the pressure they're feeling is a result of feeling like we're not adequately staffed. The other thing that they're feeling is things that matter to them is things like training and development and this sort of thing. So these are exactly the things that we're talking about taking away or curtailing, at least for a period of time. So those aren't things that are going to help that work for sure. But I think it's the way that we go through the process and in a respectful way, as I say, and work with folks. The one thing we've done is open up an opportunity for employees to be able to submit ideas as to where they may see efficiencies inside the service. And I personally believe we have smart people. They're super engaged. And of course, the people closest to the work are often the people that can tell you where your biggest opportunities are. And we've seen that. We have over 100 suggestions, and so we're going through those. But like I say, our folks are very engaged in the work. And they would just, I think, they would just like to see a more stable environment. I think I said that maybe to one of you in a year-ender. Somebody asked, if you could have anything in 2025, what would it be? And I said, just a more stable operating environment. Well, apparently we're not there yet, so we'll continue to work on that. But it is very challenging.
Getting back to the photo radar issue itself, since the these changes brought in by the province. Has CPS noticed any difference in people's driving? I mean, are you seeing more collisions? Are you seeing more carelessness, more chance taking by motorists?
Well, I would say just this, this all happens at year end, right? So one of the things that we've been reporting on lately at year end is that we've had a record number of fatal collisions in 29 in 2024. We had a record number of pedestrian collisions in 2029 or 2024 at 13. That's a big number for us because, like I say, our average previous to this has been around 4 a year. Fatal pedestrian collisions. Yeah. So we are seeing, and if we look online and some of the things that we see the public concerned about, it's the big ones. It's distracted driving. It's speed. Like I say, we had a good year at the end of the year around impaired driving, and we sent kudos out to Calgarians for the great work there. But I would still say if you get out on Stony Trail and Deerfoot and the major arteries, those are the two roads with the most collisions in the city. And so I still see some pretty shocking things there.
I know you guys are doing a lot of recruiting. Anything on hiring freezes or anything like that, either on the civilian side or the uniform side?
So on the civilian side, we have paused civilian hiring, and that doesn't mean we've stopped it. So everybody's job in the organization is very important, but as a short-term measure, all of the staffing actions that we were going to do, we're just stopping and looking at them and saying, can we slow those down? Because if we can slow them down even a little bit, it saves us money. So that's not the long-term solution. Obviously, that's basically to make sure we get to where we need to be as we work through the process. On the sworn side, it's actually very complicated in the sense that we have a number of recruit classes planned for 2024 that we did have planned. You know that we put extra resources into recruiting, and so in times like this, when we're trying to get the pipeline flowing, which we have flowing, then we have knock-on effects. We have to have additional people in training. Then we have to have additional people as police training officers, so field training officer coaches. So if you were to slow down the sworn hiring, I think it sends a message also to applicants that maybe we're not open for business and they may look elsewhere. So at a time when competition is fierce for people that want to get into the industry, that is not a message that we want to send. So I want to continue with the sworn hiring. What we have done, though, where we've been able to make pull some big levers, but they're temporary levers, is with respect to we had growth in the budget last year of, I think, 28 sworn officers, so for 2025. So we have not hired those. So those were positions we could have hired as of January 1st, 2025. Those have been parked. So that'll be a significant savings for the whole of the year. So it's quite complex, but as I say, the big thing I don't want to do is to give the impression that we're not going to continue to hire, because frankly, we need to. So we need to find a way through this that allows us to get back on that path and not disrupt it in a way that's going to be detrimental to us.
My last one from me. What is your ideal timeline here? Obviously, you guys will eventually here later in the spring go and speak to Police Commission about that budget submission to City Council. So what's your timeline here about trying to get this under control before you guys submit an ask to City Council? That's
the challenge. I mean, really, Adam, right now, there is no opportunity until, as in terms of a scheduled opportunity to speak to Council, there is no opportunity until the budget adjustment process in November. And that's way too late. Like, again, $28 million is a big number for us. So the challenge for us is to do enough early, because if we wait too far into the year, you can appreciate, I've given this example a couple of times. We got a budget cut. The day I started here in 2019, I remember Mayor Nenshi at the time sat down at my swearing in and said, sorry about the budget cut. So we had a budget cut at that time of $7 or $8 million, but we got that in June. So we weren't looking for $7 or $8 million out of the full budget. We were looking out of half of it. So the longer that we admire the problem here, the less opportunity we have to actually deal with it. So that's the urgency here.
The G7 coming up, and the timing of that with all of this instability, I mean, how much more of a stress does that put on?
I don't think it's going to put any more stress on. The issue that we're facing around the budget actually adds uncertainty to a period of time where there's already enough of it. There's already quite a lot of uncertainty. But in terms of G7, we've got a team that's working on that. That team is working really well with Public Safety Canada and the RCMP. We've done it before. Financially, it's not an impact. Of course, there's contribution agreements in place between the federal government for hosting this as a global affair. So that's not going to have an impact on the budget per se. Where it'll have an impact, again, is just on capacity. that's the challenge right there. Is, you know, I say that public safety and service to Calgarians will remain a top priority. But anytime you're talking about a reduction of this magnitude, you're talking about a reduction in capacity. So there are many things that Calgarians enjoy with respect to working with the Calgary Police Service. And so that's where the impacts are going to be in those places. And so that's why, knowing what we know about how Calgarians are feeling right now, it's far from ideal.
Chief, what happens if we have more protests this year, more type of events like that, more things that require the same kind of service that we had over the last few years?
Yeah, we're going to have a hard look at those things. We have seen the protests and demonstrations have a lot of emotion. We've seen them have counter-protests there, which actually ups the risk for public safety issues and assaults and that type of thing. And then also we've seen lots of complaints come to the police around things like potential hate crimes and hate speech and these sorts of things. So it does bring more work. We are really going to have to look at what point some of that becomes just it's a weekend business, and find ways. As I said before, we were trying to manage the amount of impact to the budget for those events by taking officers out of districts to do that work. The challenge that we found is that those are opportunity costs, because the service levels that were there for Calgarians was being degraded by the fact that officers were downtown or wherever the protest might be, and then not able to respond as readily in the district. So, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? Like I feel like we've got a double bedspread on a queen mattress, and every time we pull it over to cover something, we're exposing something else. And so there's a lot of demands out there, and we're going to do our very best to continue to meet them, but this is going to be a challenge.
Building on Bill's question there, like obviously the G7 coming up here is going to draw protests. I think it's a virtual guarantee at this point. Like, does Public Safety Canada cover that cost, or is this going to be yet another thing that is going to have to be borne by the Calgary Police and leads into this sort of problem? No,
the budget, like the impacts of the G7 will be covered. Expenses that relate to G7 will be covered by the federal government. The other thing is that won't all fall to our members either. We have, recognizing that we need to continue to provide policing to Calgarians in the ordinary course, as well as deal with the impacts of G7. We have some mutual aid agreements in place, so other organizations, Edmonton, Vancouver, other Alberta Police Services will help out with that as well. So that won't all fall to our members.
Some of the little hidden things as well. I know the police service has been working with Statistics Canada on a number of projects. I mean, there's lots of things that the public doesn't always necessarily see front-facing, but what's going on behind the scenes there. How is this likely to affect maybe some of those things that are beneficial to Calgarians, but not necessarily the most public-facing ones?
Well, I think that's it, right? I think none of the work that we're doing, either work that's really, stuff that's high profile that you see, or work that is unseen in the background, is not valuable. But that's exactly it. As you diminish your capacity, you have to ask yourself that question: what are we not going to do here? So it really just comes down to difficult choices, and continuing with the difficult choices until we balance the budget, because going over budget is not something we've ever done, and not something that's an option for us. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.